prepared a meal for them, one of these guests says something crazy. The guest says the most unlikely of things, that in due time, Sarah, who is well past the age of childbearing, is going to give birth to a son. And that son would be the child of promise. For Sarah, that was such an outlandish pronouncement that all she could do was laugh. As the guests finish their meal, we come to find out that they are on their way to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, these are no ordinary guests. These three men have been sent by God to judge and to execute judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah because of the graveness of their sin and corruption. Now, as these three guests prepare to leave Abraham, they begin to wonder out loud if they should share with Abraham the judgment they are about to deliver. And this is where we find the heart of the matter. Beginning in Genesis chapter 18, verse 17, the Lord said, "Shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do? Seeing that Abraham shall become a great and mighty nation." Now in parentheses you can say he's going to become a great and mighty nation through the child that Sarah is going to give birth to. And that all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. No, for I have chosen him. I have chosen him that he may charge his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. You see, I believe the story of Isaiah chapter 1, the story of the whole book of Isaiah, even the story of the Bible, can be captured in these words to Abraham. Abraham, you shall become a great and mighty nation. And all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in you. No, I have chosen you, that you may charge your children and your household after you to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. If I were going to put it another way, I think it would go something like this. Abraham, I have chosen you, your family, and your descendants to live a life that is more than, so that a world that has become less than can be blessed, can be restored, and can be redeemed.
Yeah, that's good.
In Isaiah chapter 1, verse 10, God is furious with the leaders and the people of Judah. And he compares them to Sodom and Gomorrah because they have forgotten who they were called and chosen to be. They were called and chosen to be like their father Abraham. They were called and chosen to be blessed, to be a blessing. They were called and chosen to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice. They were called and chosen to live a life that was more than for a world that was drowning and less than living.
Okay, that's good.
In Isaiah chapter 1, verses 11 through 15, we see the people of God trying to substitute right living with right worship. So they wanted to be chosen on Sunday and Sodom and Gomorrah Monday through Saturday. But God wasn't having it. You see, God has no interest in their sacrifices, their offerings, their processions, their solemn assemblies, or their festivals. He doesn't even want to hear their prayers. He says, I cannot endure solemn assemblies with iniquity. Your new moons, your appointed festivals, my soul hates. Even though you make many prayers, I will not listen. I got 3 kids. I think sometimes I say the same thing to them. What I hear God saying, though, in verses 11 through 15, is that this is more than a church thing.
Yes, sir. More than a church thing.
This is more than the songs you sing and the sermons you preach.
My Lord.
This is more than your programs, your pews, and your offering plates.
Yeah.
This is more than your Sunday best or your finest dress.
Oh, my God.
What I hear him saying is that you are called and chosen.
Yes, sir.
You are called and chosen to worship the Lord daily with the content of your lives.
Yeah.
That every day you were called and chosen to live lives that bless, lives that restore, lives that redeem, and lives that reconcile.
That's all right, man.
What I hear God saying in Isaiah chapter 1, verses 11 through 15, is this is more than a church thing.
More than a church thing.
And that you were called, and you were chosen to live a life that was more than for a world drowning in less than.
Drowning, Lord.
Now, if we can have an honest conversation this morning.
Yeah, be honest. Come on.
I don't think the world has changed much since Isaiah's times.
All right. Watch out.
This last year, it was mentioned before, I spent the whole last year out of the United States.
Yeah.
Living in Warsaw, Poland. And while I was away, some things happened. For instance, about 325 mass shootings happened in the United States while I was away. While I was away, about 70,000 people died from drug overdose. While I was away, black men were 6 times more likely to be arrested than white men. The number of hate crimes in America increased for the 5th straight year in a row.
Oh, yeah.
While I was away, 1 in 8 Americans still live below the poverty line. While I was away, 27.5 million Americans still had no health insurance. And if we're willing to be really honest this morning, the people of God haven't fared much better as well. In the United Methodist Church, in the 12 months that I was away, about 100,000 people left being members of the United Methodist Church. Last April, it was reported that for the first time in America, no religion as a category topped a survey of Americans' religious identity. The author of the study found that 23.1% of Americans now claim no religion. I mean, that's 1 in 4 Americans claim no religion whatsoever. We are a nation that is divided, filled with hate and violence, and far too often the people of God have forgotten, like the people of Judah, that we are called and we are chosen.
Yes, sir.
Like the people of Judah, we live in desperate and uncertain times. And now more than ever, our communities, our nation, and our world needs a called and chosen people. It needs a more than people who know that this is more than a church thing.
Yeah.
But how, you might be asking?
How?
How? Do we, in the words of Mark Labberton, how do we live what we profess? How do we be God's clear signal to a watching world that there's a God who is the light in our darkness? Isaiah provides both Judah and us an answer to our question in verses 16 and 17 when he says, wash yourselves.
Wow.
Make yourselves clean. Remove the evil of your doings from before my eyes. Cease to do evil. Learn to do good. Seek justice. Rescue the oppressed. Defend the orphan.
Yeah.
Plead for the widow. Isaiah has given us a 2-step prescription to live a life that is more than. In our life with God, our first step always involves turning to Jesus. The first step is always confessing our sin and receiving the unmatched, unmerited grace that only Jesus can provide.
Yes, sir.
Like the prodigal son returning home, the first step always involves returning to the Father, where once again we need to be reminded who we are and whose we are. Some of you, I'm afraid, this morning may have forgotten who you are. You are the beloved. You are sons and daughters of the Most High God. You are heirs of the promise. You are the adopted, the never forsaken body of Christ. You are a new creation, forgiven to forgive, redeemed to redeem, rescued to rescue, transformed to transform. You are ambassadors of reconciliation. You are a royal priesthood, called and chosen. You are blessed to be a blessing. Because we are all of these things and more, we can take the second step that Isaiah prescribes to us, to cease to do evil, learn to do good, and seek justice. Because of who we are, we can. And Isaiah, I think, would say we have to, or we must, rescue the oppressed, defend the orphan, and plead for the widow. You see, because of who we are, we can and we must speak for the voiceless, protect the vulnerable, stand with the ignored, embrace the cast off, discarded, and forgotten. You see, because of who we are, we can and we must live lives that are more than for a world drowning in less than. Because of who we are, we can and we must, in the words of John Wesley, do all we can, all the good we can, by all the means we can, in all the ways we can, in all the places we can, at all the times we can, to all the people we can, as long as ever we can. 10 years ago, it's been more than 10 years ago, on January 20th, 2009, our nation and our world were in the midst of an economic disaster. Little did we know on that historic day in January, when hope was so near it felt like you could just kind of reach out your hand and take hold of it, that 10 years later our nation would be defined by division, hate,